Okay.
Welcome everybody to our today's meeting of the Eco Working Group. We are recording this meeting just for your information, and we will be posting this out on our YouTube channel. We have a pretty decent agenda today. We're going to have a really great presentation first. We're going to have a report out on the climate teach-in. We're also going to have a report out. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. We're going to have a report out on the CJ team's activities, the Climate Solution Now implementation, and we're also going to talk about webinars. Let's start out with our presentation. So Kate Vogel is here from the Department of Natural Resources. She's a coastal resilience planner, and she is a former NOAA Coastal Management Fellow with the Chesapeake and Coastal Service. And she's going to be talking to us today about a guide to planning for climate change on Maryland's public lands. So welcome, Kate.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought I was unmuted still. Thank you all. It's exciting to be here. And also when you had your cameras on, everyone, I just really like all of your backgrounds. So naturey, and I feel like I'm moving soon, and I definitely will want to get something different. So I was noticing that. But today I will be giving a presentation on planning for climate change on state lands, which we're hoping to transfer to public lands. So for all of us in the climate change planning realm, this is going to be a very good, I think, basis for starting to understand how to address vulnerabilities, risk, and adaptation on public lands. So I'll give you a little bit of context for my fellowship project, and then if there's time, we'll go into a website that I created for this, which, by the way, how much time do I have to present? Is it like until 3:20-ish, or? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's
I have my name here, but I also have my colleague Sarah Coleman here, because my project that I'll be talking about today stemmed from my NOAA Coastal Management Fellowship opportunity, and Sarah Coleman is actually going to be continuing this work as a conservation resilience planner. So now I focus on flood planning for DNR in Chesapeake and Coastal Service, and this project on the state lands is now going to be transferred over to Sarah Coleman, which is really exciting. So this fellowship project started in 2020 when I was matched with Maryland DNR. And the goal of this project was to create an adaptation and resilience plan for 3 state lands that analyzed current and future climate impacts and made recommendations for future management opportunities. And so we really wanted to work across units at DNR to advance climate change planning. This was a very interdisciplinary effort that involved over 30 people to identify climate risks and important features of each public land that we were working with. The 3 state lands that we chose had different classifications so that we could diversify our understanding of impacts and what solutions exist. So we had a wildlife management area, a state park, and a state forest. And some of them were tidally influenced and some were not impacted by the tides. And so this gave us kind of an understanding of what's happening in freshwater ecosystems versus our salty systems. And finally, we created a plan, a physical report for each of these land units so that they could have an adaptation and resilience plan to reference in the future. This project stemmed from this map that was created in partnership with the Eastern Shore Regional GIS Collaborative. It's a little bit hard to see. I couldn't find a bigger version, but essentially this mapped all of the state's public lands, DNR-owned lands, and it compared ecological value to climate vulnerabilities. So the yellow is a high ecological value. So this is rare, threatened, and endangered species, natural wildlife areas, preserved areas, areas where you might find some really diverse ecosystems. Whereas the blue colors, the kind of like neon turquoise blue that you can see here on the right of this diamond, represented coastal and climate values. So this would be sea level rise, saltwater intrusion, precipitation, and other factors like that. And then they combined these scores, and the darkest blues showed where you might have the highest vulnerability and the most valuable species. Using this, we decided to choose the 3 public lands. These, my animations are a little bit off. These included Browns Branch Wildlife Management Area, Pocomoke State Forest, and Assateague Park. I'll go back to this map, and you can see in those regions, it's a little bit of a darker blue. You have some different colors in Pocomoke, so it's experiencing both high ecological value and high climate risk. And then Assateague, as a 2-mile barrier island, was really vulnerable as well. And you can see on this map, we got some geographic variation as well. So Assateague has the coastal bays. It also has the Atlantic Ocean. Browns Branch has really high quality freshwater streams and an endangered dwarf wedge mussel species there as well. And the Pocomoke State Forest has a mixture of both. It has rare, threatened, endangered species. It's tidally influenced. You have some preservation areas in there. And so just these 3 sites really gave us a good look at what kind of adaptation techniques should we be recommending across Maryland. In CCS, we have this way of thinking about our projects, which is to understand, plan, and implement. And this is really guiding all of the work that we do. And right now in a lot of projects, we're looking at how are we moving forward from understanding and planning to implementation. And this presentation will touch on that just a little bit. The team that we worked with to assess each of these areas involves CCS, the Critical Area Commission, Engineering and Construction, the Maryland Coastal Bays, Forest Service, Fishing and Boating Services, Park Service, and Wildlife and Heritage Service. And we met quarterly to review data, to brainstorm ideas for the plan, including everything from layout and formatting to what graphics do we need. And then as it was published, everyone looked at the edits and made recommendations to make sure that all concerns were heard. So we started by just saying, what is happening in Maryland? We wanted numbers, we needed to ground truth data. And so we started with temperature. We found that temperatures in Maryland have already increased by an average of 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit since the beginning of the 20th century. And we use this to look at the impacts on public health and invasive species. We looked at sea level rise and how using the Cambridge Tide Gauge, sea level rise across Maryland is generally predicted to be about 1.7 feet by the year of 2050. We talked about storm intensity increasing and frequency increasing, which impacts infrastructure and public safety. And we talked about precipitation increases, which also impacts project planning and recreation. If you're supposed to camp at Assateague and your campsite's flooded, that's going to impact your experience there. So how are we combining recreation, public health, everything into these climate change plans? Lastly, we also looked at invasive species, which were different at all 3 areas, but were becoming more common and were commonly mentioned as one of the most intensive time sinks, I would say, of managing each of these areas. After we understood the broad impacts across the state, we continued to identify relevant literature. So this meant looking at the saltwater intrusion plans, the sea level rise plans and data that we had found. I looked at the impacts of Phragmites management on native ecosystems and ghost forests and things like that. And we also looked a lot at sustainable infrastructure. After we did this literature review and kind of comprehensive understanding of what threats might exist at each of these places, we used tools to identify site-specific vulnerabilities. So we looked at mapping tools to really get this data and say to the land managers, here's what we've been noticing. And then we ground truth this all with site visits. I wanted to share some of the assessment tools because I know that you all use these too, and that I think they can benefit all of us in using them in similar ways. So we use the Maryland Coastal Atlas to look at 0 to 2 feet of sea level rise. We also used it for storm surge and looking at wetland adaptation areas. The NOAA Sea Level Rise Viewer helped us predict sea level rise beyond 2050 because it goes beyond 2 feet, which the Coastal Atlas does not in feet increments. We use the guidance for using Maryland's 2018 sea level rise projections, which uses low, medium, and high tolerances to determine what level of sea level rise an infrastructure planning project should prepare for. Precipitation was a tricky one for me to find, but I finally figured out how to use the projected intensity duration frequency curve data tool, which shows precipitation increasing across the state at different time levels. And so this is really important for statewide project planning because you can see if it's going from 2 inches per year or 2 inches per event to 3 inches, which can really make a big difference in flash flooding events. After we understand, we plan. And this is what got us to these 3 plans. So we mentioned that we did site visits and we found this site-specific data. We used the tools and we used this data to inform the development of 3 plans. Each of these plans had 3 sections, one for natural resources, infrastructure, human resources, cultural resources, and recreation. For each of these sections, we said, if we are continuing as usual with our current management strategies, so for example, invasive species removal, sand removal, stream revegetation, how is climate going to impact that? So there's going to be more invasive species. You're going to be having to do the sand management more often. You might be experiencing more erosion. And we took that and we said, okay, so if you were able with funding and time and staff to do more to prepare for climate change, what would that look like? And so for each of those sections, we had no climate action and climate action scenarios. And that's where we really got into be invasive species early while you can. Look at stream management as the whole, from the whole system. Get creative with your natural and nature-based solutions. At Assateague, we looked at removing some campsites from drive-in and from RV campsites and making them completely walk-in sand sites because that reduces time on the staff to get sand off of campsites, but it also allows people to continue camping there. And so it was, how do we find that balance? We, in part, communicated this through graphics that we developed. This is one showing how changing precipitation patterns and increasing storm frequency could really impact roads and lead to culverts being overwhelmed and road deterioration. And so we talked about how you can expand wetlands, potentially relocate roads, create floodplain parks. So our state lands are already really interactive and they host a lot of people. How can we adapt to climate change while creating signage and opportunities for people to actually engage in the changes that are happening there? So for example, at Assateague, they experience a lot of dune erosion, and we suggested making an educational dune area so that people could learn about the dunes and why they shouldn't walk on them, learn how they protect Assateague, but still get to feel like they're a part of the system by getting to play with this fake dune. One other picture that I really liked that was really applicable, I think, across the state is this graphic for forested streams. And you can see that we had some recommendations here compiled by everyone on the Technical Advisory Committee. These are very standard practices that DNR recommends to reduce stream erosion. And this includes floodplain reconnection, the use of step pools, beaver dam analogs, using tow wood to reduce wave energy, and using live stakes and vegetation to also reduce wave energy. I am going to drop the link to these graphics in the chat. They are free to use. They are publicly available as long as you keep the image credit with them. So these are on our Flickr page. So after we planned and used these graphics, we were talking about, well, what's next? What's next in the short term? What's next in the long term? And this is where we got to the implementation phase. So right now, in real time, Assateague is using the plan to inform management decisions. What does that mean? Such a broad statement. This means that we're meeting with them in 2 weeks to look at what their prioritized restoration decisions were and how we can find funding for that. What vegetation do they need? How is the climate planning going? And so those conversations are actively happening now. Browns Branch added their climate change plan into their management plan. So it's an appendix, and anyone looking at the management plan for decisions, if it says we need to focus on stream restoration, they can go to the stream restoration section of their plan. And so that's been helpful for guiding decisions as well. The Pocomoke State Forest Plan is being used as a guide for climate change planning and the Chesapeake Forest Lands. And a draft of the Chesapeake Forest Lands Climate Plan has already been created using the Pocomoke State Forest one. I just want to emphasize the Chesapeake Forest Lands Plan was created in 3 months. These 3 plans took me 2 years to write and collect data, but now that we have these templates, it's a lot faster, and we can expand this statewide faster than we started because now we have the templates, we have ground truth recommendations for restoration, and it's really exciting. From this project, we learned that planning for climate change takes time. That's something that you all know, but it's also really important that you have an interdisciplinary team for it. Who can we invite? Who can we have on these conversations for gender, age, diversity of location? How are we all factoring in different decisions from different units, agencies, to really move forward on this climate change planning? We also learned that we can help others. And so in CCS's way of helping understand, plan, and implement for climate change, we wanted to just highlight some of these upcoming projects that we have. Some of them we already mentioned, which were the Chesapeake Forest Lands project that's moving forward. This is a collaborative effort with Pocomoke State Forest. And we also are working in the Pocomoke region for helping the targeted resilience areas. Sorry that I didn't spell that out, but it's our targeted resilience areas, so identifying sites for restoration. We also are in the process of creating a second living shoreline at Assateague, and we're redesigning the ranger station at Assateague based on recommendations that we put into their climate change plan. How can you find more information? Well, this whole process and the plans are all summarized on this website that we created, which is called A Guide to Planning for Climate Change on Maryland's Public Lands. This is a public website that is hosted on Google, and it is something that we can all access and share. And I'm going to, again, drop the link in the chat. And I think that is about time, but I will just really quickly move over and show you what the website looks like so that you can just see what tabs exist. We have on the homepage, and this is where I put a lot of the facts that I shared at the beginning of our presentation with links to all of the information. We have planning steps for climate change identified, which include framing the issue, tools, providing adaptation options, how to prioritize and plan for implementing these options, and then moving forward with taking action, which includes some funding resources. We have the 3 plans right here. They're sorted out by what type of land unit they are. And so this is the Assateague plan, and you can see, we have a little bit of a blurb about it, the key impacts and recommendations, and then you can actually scroll through the plan or download it. These can also be found on DNR's website as well. Something else that may be of interest for everyone on the Climate Change Commission is that we have summarized the literature review onto this resources page, where I have collected all of my most used, most recommended resources. I'm getting tongue twisted today. Recommended resources for climate planning These are basically my climate Bible and have so much good information and guidance for adaptation planning. They provide case studies from areas that are near and far from us, but many coastal. And so definitely feel free to look through these. So that's what the website looks like. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you have any, you can email me as well. And if you ever want to just walk through the website, or if you have questions on the plans, I would be happy to answer them.
Gosh, Kate, what a fabulous presentation. I actually have a question. I'm sure there are several others, but is there a plan to scale this up and apply this to all the state-owned lands, public lands, or since you did a sampling of 3?
Yeah, so that is such a great question. We are working with the Chesapeake Forest Lands right now, so that's the Maryland Forest Service. And then, like I said, we have a meeting with Parks soon. Parks has had a lot of changes in leadership recently, which is really exciting because it's giving us an opportunity to reconnect and reintroduce ourselves to some of the new managers and see what their interest is in collecting climate change information. And so I really do believe that our goal is to get this out to as many state lands as we can. Not everyone wants a state plan. So we originally had actually thought, oh, Nanticoke Wildlife Management Area might be a really great place for one of these plans. And we did a site visit and it was beautiful. And the land manager said, like, look, people are going to hunt here, whether it's flooded or not. We know that. We don't really need an in-depth analysis of that. And they suggested Browns Branch to us. And so that is happening. I'm not sure if there's going to be any policy or legislation that comes out that actually requires every DNR publicly owned land to have a climate change plan. Personally, I think we have the resources to do it. We work with the University of Maryland to get students involved with this also. They've seen the templates, they have made graphics for us. And I think that if people are interested, they can contact Sarah and hopefully we'll start to see this, even if it's just included in the habitat management plans or strategic management plan for 5 years.
Fabulous. Any other questions? Oh, Susan's got her hand up.
Kate, it's a beautiful presentation. Thank you so much. In terms of producing it, was it all in-house, or how did you make such a beautiful presentation so that we can, keep that in mind when we're doing things?
Yeah, so I actually just used Google Slides for it. All of the pictures are pictures that I have personally taken. And in Google Slides, for example, we created a template, and I could probably share it with you. Let me try and go to a slide that has a better example of this.
Is it similar to Canva?
So Google Slides is similar to PowerPoint the most, I would say. Some of the graphics that we have were created in Canva, and Maryland's Sea Level Rise guidance document was created in Canva. I do use Canva sometimes as well, but now that we have this template that I really like, I just tend to use this. I'm trying to go back, sorry, to show you this intro slide, or like this. So this, for example, we had just like a plain background, and then we added 2 text box and changed their background color. And it ended up like this. So again, I can send you my presentation, and I think we could send you the template if you wanted to. But as a side note, I would just be happy to teach you a little bit about Google Slides if you want. It's a really cool tool.
Thank you, Kate.
Before we go to Donald, I have a follow-up question to that, which is, who did the cross-sectional plan graphics?
So that was created, those were created by the University of Maryland PALS program. So it's the Partnership for Action Learning and Sustainability. And I believe that I can actually send you the link to it. So we have a contract pretty much annually with the Partnership for Action Learning and Sustainability program. And we tell them we would like climate change graphics. And they say, oh my gosh, we have a professor in landscape architecture who's looking for a project for his students. And so for these graphics specifically, we were able to pay and compensate the students directly for their time because they did it in like their winter semester. Other projects, we typically have $10,000. So the graphics, they made 10 graphics for $4,500. Our other projects typically span a semester and are funded with about $10,000. And they can help us with reports, data. Right now, they're working on some climate surveys. And this is the link to the page on UMD. So Michael Esbon and his students made these for us, and we'll be working with them again this summer.
That's great. Thank you so much. All right, Donald, you have a question?
Yes, yeah, thank you for the excellent presentation, Kate. I do have a question on you mentioned one of the sites, I think it was Brown. Was it endangered mussel species, or
Yes.
does
Yes,
your plan
Oh, sorry,
ahead.
finish your question. Yeah.
No, I was just asking, does your plan go into like the impact on that individual species, since you mentioned that as part of the opening talk?
Yes, so I don't have too much information in there about it. I have a picture, so it's the dwarf wedge mussel, and I have a picture of it, and the dwarf wedge mussel is actually a host species, I think, for a fish. They have a mutual relationship. And I talk about how the erosion at Browns Branch is decreasing the mussel's population. And so we connect that back to why the restoration there is going to be important. Let me go to I can drop the link too. So all 3 climate change plans can be found here too, if you wanted to look closer at the Browns Branch one under our climate publications.
No, that'd be great. I'm really interested in sharing some of that information. We have a project that focuses on students raising mussels, and then working with the Anacostia Watershed Society to deliver those mussels in the Anacostia River to improve water quality. So bringing in the tide to climate, and the impact on like a mussel species would I think go really well, and also provide career connections associated with it. So I'm really interested in that. And then if I can ask another question, and not, I can follow up with you. I'm interested in the template that you mentioned, and how easily you think your approach could be adapted to like a student project where they view an area of Maryland, let's say, and look at impacts, right? And of course, not the 2-year project that you created, right? But on a smaller scale, they take an area and use your approach to come up with a resiliency or adaptation measure for that area.
That is a really great question. I'm going to scroll through this ASATEAQ plan as an example. Let's see, I will share this tab instead. So we have had professors interested in working with this. And I think that, first I want to say, I think that any age student could do this in different capacities, right? So if you had younger students, you could just have them kind of look broadly at what are the impacts of a flood on infrastructure and get them thinking of like, oh, when it rains, there's erosion and pollution and things like that. But at some older levels, that's where you could start saying, here's this list of tools. We have the tools on the website link that I shared with you. And, we want to know how sea level rise impacts ASATEAQ. You give them the tools, you tell them where ASATEAQ is. I think that could build a story. So some professors have said, what's your need for this? And one professor said, maybe I have 5 student groups and we try and create 5 different climate plans, and just you have 5 students in a group, each one takes a different section, you write it in a semester. And that was one proposal. Another professor said, let's say we want to focus on Patapsco State Park. Each group would take a different section instead of each group taking a different plan. So you'd have one student group working on natural resources, infrastructure, and I think we have tools to start looking at this. We have tools to look at sea level rise, high tide flooding, precipitation, environmental equity and social justice considerations, and kind of overall climate resilience. And so when I talk about these different sections, that's where I'm getting at right here with this natural resources, infrastructure. You could really easily, I think, break that up for student groups and have them start to look at that. For each one, we just wrote a little bit of a summary of each impact. And then we had priority recommendations. And so just kind of scrolling through the plan, this is just what it looks like. The Assateague one is the longest one with 52 pages, but the shortest one, I think, is the Browns Branch one with about 34. And so it definitely was not about length. It was just about, what information do we need right now? And how can we convey that in the most concise way? Maybe 52 pages is too much, but there's a lot of information to capture there.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much, Kate. That was a wonderful presentation. I think the working group got a lot out of it, and we're really interested in your work, and your work products are fabulous. Great way to communicate climate change.
Thank you. I'm sure Sarah and I would be happy to collaborate with any of you too, if you have any ideas or interest. And I'll put my email in the chat as well.
Great, thank you so much.
Would you like me to stay on the meeting, or do your presenters typically leave after they've presented?
You're welcome to stay. This is
Okay.
a public meeting.
Okay, cool. I'm going to stay then.
Good.
All right, Joy,
Okay.
let's turn it over to you. Oh, sorry, Susan.
Now, I just wanted to shout out to Tristan, her colleague at DNR, and our member, and who suggested Kate for this presentation. Thank you, Tristan.
Thank you, Tristan.
Way to go. Thank you, Amy. And thanks, Kate. That was an excellent presentation. Very informative. We are at Bowie State, we're working with DNR in different ways. So one of the things that we're looking to do right now is to kind of restore some of the nature trails, which are right across from campus. I think Donald probably knows a little bit about that. And so it's good to kind of have this right now. We're looking at possibly infrastructure, invasive species management, stormwater management, all of that. So DNR is one of our partners that we're working with to try to get that area restored. So great to see. And also I like the idea of your signage to let people know some of the features at the different locations. That's something I've implemented recently on campus, kind of let people know what our stormwater systems are, what they look like, how many are on campus and so forth, because that is very important. Once people start to know, once people start to see it, then they'll will be learning from that. So all good points. All right, so I'll go ahead straight into it for the interest of time. I just basically want to provide a recap to everyone of the Earth Month kickoff, which we call the Maryland Teach-In, well, Maryland Climate Teach-In. Actually, I'm show my screen real quick if I can. Okay, so I have two different screens. I'm not sure which one is going to show. Okay, here we go. And by the way, I'm not even sure if I said good afternoon, everyone, and happy Friday Eve. May the 4th be with you, all that good stuff. Can you all see that? Okay, you can. Okay, it looks weird on my screen. So this is just the information slide. Basically, again, I'm just giving a recap of the participation that we have for the Maryland Climate Teach-In. And again,
I'm sorry,
this is
Jabari, we
yeah.
can see it, but
Uh-huh.
it doesn't come through clear. If there's any way you could zoom in,
Is that better?
I think that would help a lot. No, it doesn't look like it changed.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's looking like that.
At
Maybe
the
zoom
bottom,
in the
at the bottom right hand
right.
side of your screen, there's a little like zoom slider.
Oh, I need to go to this screen. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, it looks like that. So this is kind of, again, just gives a snapshot of the people that registered, of the different entities that registered for our event. And again, this is part of a larger worldwide event. It's called the Worldwide Teach-In. And it's basically centers around teaching about climate change, sustainability during ideally, but right before the month of April, which is Earth Month. And so we had 24, well, we actually had 12 entries. And out of those 12 entries, we had 24 events. So you can see by the graph, and I put the organizations in alphabetical order. Towson University actually had 12 different events. So kudos to Towson, a great job for them for having all the different, events, or I'm calling them events. Some of them were lectures, discussions, and so forth. So we basically had, I'm just kind of scrolling down here a little bit. 3 institutions, USM institutions, Bowie State, Towson, and UMBC. And then we had 3 different school systems that were represented as well: Baltimore County, Howard County, and Prince George's County. And I thought I had the number for each one, but I think Prince George's County had actually 2 schools to participate. Well, I'm sorry, 3 schools actually. And then we had also a couple of state agencies such as MDNR, the Conservation Education Matrix Team, then of course MDOT as well. So the good thing is we actually had we covered all ages. We started with K through 5 down here at Watershed Public Charter School and went all the way up to the adult ages. So we cover all age groups. And again, I want to remind everybody, this is our first time. So I think for our very first time, this is pretty good. And of course, we also have to keep in mind that there probably were hundreds of different events and discussions going on across the state, but this is what we have as far as those who were actually registered their event. So thank you to all of you all. I also want to thank Amy, Susan, Tristan, and Donald for the planning team to kind of help put this together with our promotion. Oh, Jessica, didn't want to leave you out, for putting all this together. And we want to try it again next year. We're going to make it bigger and better, hopefully. I think what we decided was that we will probably start the planning process earlier. Again, this is our first time doing this, so we have a blueprint already, and that will also allow us to be able to promote a little bit better. And then, of course, maybe extend the date. So we made this our own climate teach-in. We kind of modeled it after the Worldwide Teach-In, but since this is really from Maryland, we're going to kind of do it our own way, and we figure that we'll get a lot more participation if we open it up for the entire month of April, because April is Earth Month. So this is what we have. Good job, everyone. Are there any questions about this?
Thank you for your leadership on it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right. With no questions, I think we will continue. I think Tristan will be next. Tristan, you want to give your report out from Climate Justice Team?
Yes, one second. I'm just looking for my notes. Where did I put them? I think the biggest thing I wanted to share with the group, here they are, was that the Climate Justice Team is working on creating an equity toolkit. We are not sure if that's going to be the formal title, but it's in draft form at the moment. It is a document for the rest of the Climate Change Commission, so that when we're putting together policies and recommendations, that we are maintaining our climate justice lens and screening through everything. So the toolkit is going to include different questions to ask yourself and check in, like, does this explicitly call out marginalized communities as prioritized populations? Who's benefiting from this solution? How do you ensure accountability, communication, and evaluation of results? Are these policies in alignment with the community needs? Things like that. We'll have best practices, so different groups to partner with, different stakeholders to reach out to. Some of our prioritized climate justice issues, definitions, and resources. So that's what it looks like at the moment. As I said, we are still building that out. If you can think of something that would be really helpful to include in that toolkit, please let me know so I can talk to the team about adding that in. And then other than that, we are still working on expanding our partnerships, learning what other organizations are doing, how we can support them. Been having some conversations around sort of like next steps with workforce development. That's something or I am personally very passionate about including, and how we can be involved in those efforts moving forward. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to share for now. Thanks, everyone.
Go for it,
Susan,
Susan.
was that a question for me?
I'm waiting to be called on. Tristan, thank you for that. That's really exciting about the toolkit, and we'll be sure to put that on the commission website. And I would like to use it in other work that I do for the Department of the Environment.
Oh, absolutely. I am also hoping that I can use it in other groups that I'm part of that put together policies. I think these are great questions and resources to use in any recommendations or changes that we're putting forth, not just ones around climate.
Right.
I think that's a fabulous idea. And Susan and Jabari, everybody on the committee, what are your thoughts? I mean, should we consider doing something similar just for climate communications? I mean, it wouldn't be in our work plan this year, but we could maybe consider adding that to our work plan next year on, some of the things that we've learned through many of our presentations here. It's kind of a helpful guide. What do you think? It'd be
I
a
think
big
it's a great
effort.
idea, Amy. Yeah, I think we should. And again, part of what we should be doing as far as communication is really documenting what we were doing, what we're learning. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. Like you said, for next year.
Right, not this year.
Right.
I'll give you an example of how I'm using it in a creative way. I've never done this before. I pretty much know this state inside and out, though, having traveled to every nook and cranny over my years with the state. But this time, I was in charge of putting together an outreach plan for the climate change plan that will eventually be published in December, based on our partner at the Center for Global, Center for Global Sustainability at University of Maryland. They're doing the modeling and they're doing a report on the best pathways to reach our goals in the state, which is, 60% greenhouse gas emissions reductions by 2031 and net zero by 2045. So we, with the Climate Solutions Now Act, that new goal was put in statute, and also we must, besides writing the plan, between the Pathways report and the final draft plan for the state, which MDE is responsible for, with advice from the commission. A lot of mitigation work at the mitigation working group is going into the plan. We are responsible for outreach with the public. So I use the EJ tool. I actually use the EPA EJ tool to see if it's improved at all. And I was pretty impressed with it. So the places that I just kind of knew instinctively would be good places to go, I put them on the EJ map and found that yes, these are good places to go because you've got some marginalized communities. You've got it was a good diverse range of communities. So there's only one that showed up as not having any. Actually, it was Bowie, Jabari. We're gonna try to go to your school, Bowie State, but you've got a lot of communities around Bowie that are underserved. So it's still a good central spot for people to come from Central Maryland. Anyway, so that's how I was using CJ or EJ for communications, specifically for the outreach. Never have done anything like that before, and it's pretty cool. I don't know about MDE's tool yet, but we should probably look at that again too.
Yeah, I think Susan, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't MDE use a lot of what EPA is doing as well? Are they kind of modeling after what EPA has done, or?
I don't. I'm not sure how they did it. I think. See, that's another thing with the Climate Solutions Now Act. In statute, we had to come up with our own at MDE for the state. I guess they didn't trust EPA. Who knows? But there's a lot in that bill, and that's one of the things that we should look at is. And maybe we can compare. I don't think we have to use either one, but we can maybe use both or one that we think is better. We can compare them.
Okay.
We can look at that sometime, maybe at a meeting here if there's interest. Do you want me to continue? Or are we
Yeah,
finished?
I think it's a good segue to go into your segment.
Yes, I mentioned the outreach, and we'll be going on a road show with probably Mark Stewart, the program manager for the climate change program. And, he runs the mitigation working group as well, facilitates that. So probably Mark, it'll be one or two folks from the team at the CGS I mentioned, who are writing the report. There will be local elected officials invited to come, say a few words, listen to what the people are saying. But most of all, after we present the report on which we will base the plan for the state, we have to hear what the people want and what they have to say and what their ideas are and what their concerns are. And we're going to tape all of that and take it back to work and digest it all and roll it into the plan in the best ways we can. So that's that. Now, the Climate Solutions Plan also affects the commission in that we've got 4 new working groups, and we've been working hard to try to get those new working groups appointed. So we have just transition, energy, resilience and efficiency, energy industry revitalization, and solar photovoltaic systems. Looking at ways to reuse or recycle solar systems. So that's pretty exciting. So we're going to double our working groups at the commission. We also, MD is responsible for building energy performance standards, BEPS, which is a big deal across the nation. And we'll probably be one of only a handful of states that actually gets new regs out within 6 months, something like that. And we also have a new task force that MDE is responsible for, and that's the Building Energy Implementation Task Force. So those two kind of go hand in hand. So it's a huge piece of legislation, and it's causing us a lot of agita. There's just a lot of work to be accomplished, a lot of things to implement between now and next year. So I think that is all I have to say about Climate Solutions Now Act implementation. Thanks.
Thanks, Susan. I think the next agenda item was mine, which is one of our work plan items for the year. In the past, the ECO Working Group has been really successful hosting some webinars, public webinars on climate-related topics. Last year in the summer, we hosted one on the Climate Solutions Now Act. We had hundreds of people attend, and they're, basically had our speakers kind of give a summary of what was included in the act. And then we, in December, hosted a webinar on our report. And that was also attended by hundreds of folks. And again, summarizing what we were recommending. We had put in the work plan this year that maybe instead of just doing those two, we would do 4. And we were considering doing one for each of the existing work groups. So that would be mitigation, adaptation, and resilience in the science and technology. And we did email out to all of the chiefs and have heard back from mitigation as well as science and technology. They are more than willing to do a webinar, to work with us to prepare a webinar specifically on the work that their group is doing, how that impacts the state. The commission report webinar will probably end up having to get pushed to 2024. That is because the deadline for the report to be published has been pushed back a month this year. It used to be published in November. Now it will be published. Usually the webinar comes a couple weeks after the report is published, just because it's, it's pretty crazy up to the point of making the report live. So we were kind of batting around some other ideas, like maybe what can you do as a regular citizen kind of webinar. So I wanted to put that out to the whole committee or working group and see, if there are any suggestions or thoughts on doing them, by working group, by, anything like that. So any feedback, thoughts?
You all are very quiet.
I was gonna say, can I take silence to be agreement?
Well, I mean, we definitely do want to educate the our citizens, citizens of Maryland, about things that they could be doing, because there are a lot of big things we should probably concentrating on, but there are also smaller things that we could also be doing as well. So that's something that I feel like would be very relatable to most people. I think we can make it relatable as well. So I think it's a topic that's definitely needed and a little bit overdue, maybe. So what do y'all think about that? Do you have any ideas, any recommendations?
Well, I tell you, since we're going to have this plan for the state and a special website for Marylanders to go to find resources like rebates on electric vehicles and electrifying their homes and things like that. That could be something maybe we could ask if MDE would want us on MCCC to host a webinar, just kind of going around that website and showing people the resources, and actually maybe doing a webinar to educate people about where the highest GHG emissions come from. We have a really nice pie chart that shows, transportation and buildings and things like that, just to show where the largest amounts come from and even the smaller amounts, and that it's not going to cut it anymore for people just to stop buying plastic water bottles, and lowering their thermostat or something, just the small things that people do now, have been doing for years and years. Now we're asking, it's a bigger ask of people globally, but for us specifically in Maryland, that we need to ask people to please buy an EV when you go to get a new car. You don't have to get it right now, but think about that. And there should be some incentives, and there are a lot from the federal government and the state government through primarily the Inflation Reduction Act. So we're seeing that money flowing already to Maryland. So that kind of thing. In fact, somebody on our staff the other day just said they threw out their old heating system, which was oil, and just got some rebates and have gone completely electric at their home. So we only have a couple million more to convince to do that. So if we can educate and, show people how this affects that and what you could do, and, that might be a good thing for us to do. I don't know what y'all think.
Tristan
Jess-
got her hand up, and then Jess. So let's do Tristan first, and then Jess.
Can you all hear me? I had to jump into the car.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Susan, I think that the idea of a website tour webinar is really wonderful. So often I see folks put tools out there and they stick them on the website and they expect people to just know how to find them and know how to navigate around. So I think that would be really smart for us to do. And then as far as solutions that match the scale of the problem, which I think is what you were getting to around adjusting your thermostat or carrying a reusable water bottle, all great things to do, not necessarily going to have a really large impact when it comes to fighting the changes we see in our climate. Project Drawdown has a ton of resources around things that have those really big impacts, and also different industries that can make some big changes. Like, I know it's been a while since I've looked at it, but last time I saw, they were really highlighting the impacts that like the HVAC industry can have and how much greenhouse gas is tied up with those sorts of activities and appliances and all that stuff. So I would highly recommend either we link to that or pull some of their resources to share that we feel are really Maryland specific.
That's fantastic. Thanks for that,
That's great.
Tristan.
Jessica?
Hi, I'm actually calling in because for some reason it doesn't let me talk on my computer, so I'm on both. I recently just finished a campaign with Florida Water Star, and I wanted to share some insights because it's very similar to what we're trying to accomplish here. With our Florida Water Star campaign, the goal of the campaign was to increase awareness surrounding builders to create water efficient homes. So trying to get more builders to engage in the Florida Water Star program. And the Florida Water Star program is very similar to what we're discussing here with, energy efficient appliances and trying to incorporate more of them, and really showing not only the builders, but Florida residents the benefits of going with a Florida Water Star certified builder. So we can take some of the insights that we learned from this campaign and kind of apply it to what we're trying to do here. They had a very similar setup. They had a website where you could go for more information. On the website, there wasn't really any action items that they listed. And we found that after completing this campaign, that we needed to include some of those action items so that we can measure, the effect of the awareness effort. So I would encourage, this project to include measurable metrics, whether that is you want your consumers to download an information guide, you want them to sign up for more information. There needs to be some kind of actionable item that we can then measure this campaign by so that we can move forward with those additional insights and pivot any future campaigns. And I'd be more than happy to share with the group a full recap of that campaign. It's about 75% finished, but I would like to include some additional information there so you guys can get a more holistic view of what that campaign looked like and how that affected Florida Water Star. And I'm kind of waiting for some of their data to come and meet mine.
That's great. Maybe you can do a presentation at an upcoming meeting about it.
I would absolutely love to.
I think that would be very cool. So we're over time, and so I have two things that I definitely want to do before we finish up, which is I just want to put a call out to anybody who was interested in working with me on the webinars. They do take a lot of coordination and effort, and volunteers don't have to work on all four. Just one would be great to have some support. If there's anybody that's interested, just let me know. You can put it in chat, or you can send me an email. And then the last step of our meetings is always to open this meeting up for public comment. And if there's any questions or I'm not sure how many members of the public are still on since we're running late, but if there's anybody that has a comment or a question, thank you, Jessica. I'm writing that down. We are open for public comment for the next few minutes. Okay, with no comments or questions, we'll close out this meeting, the May 4th edition of the ECO Working Group. Thank you, everybody. This was a great meeting. I think we got some really interesting ideas moving forward. I think we learned a lot. Thank you, Kate, for joining us and showing us your amazing, amazing reports. And yeah, this was a really great meeting. So thank you all for attending, and we'll see you at our next meeting. And feel free to email me if you want to help out with the webinars.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody. Have
Bye.
a great Friday and a great weekend.
You
You
too.
too.